Hi, everyone. Welcome to our infant nap workshop hosted by Nanit. I am Dr. Natalie Barnett, and I'm joined today by Dr. Lauren Covington from the University of Delaware, and we're very excited to have her here with us today. We will just give everyone a minute to join. And if you wanted to pop into the chat and tell us where you're joining from and how old your baby is, that might be a great place for us to start as we see folks joining, which is great. And then going forward, just a little bit of housekeeping. We will be using the chat for any questions that you may have. We'll hope to get to most of your questions throughout the webinar or towards the end. And at the end of the webinar, we will be announcing our giveaway winner. We are giving away a Nanit sound and light machine, and that will be to one winner at the end, and we'll announce it then. So I think we will go ahead and get started. This is our infant nap workshop hosted by Nanit. My name is Dr. Natalie Barnett, and I am the VP of Clinical Research here at Nanit, and I'm joined today by one of our amazing research collaborators, Dr. Lauren Covington from the University of Delaware. We're going to talk today a little bit about, naps for different ages, working towards having your babies on a schedule, when you can expect somewhat of a schedule from your babies, and some common sleep disruptions that may things that may disrupt naps and sleep in general. So Lauren, I wanted to talk a little bit initially actually about a safe and supportive nap environment, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what are the recommendations and guidelines around a safe sleep environment.
Yes, absolutely. So, when we're talking about babies from 4 months to 11 months or up to a year, really, ideally, we want them to be sleeping in a crib on their back, and alone, not with, any other items in the crib. We want the crib to be completely clear so that there's not anything that could risk them blocking their airway. That's also why we want them on their back, not their stomach.
Yep.
So that is the ideal sleeping situation. And obviously, we know naps can happen in other places, such as like they could fall asleep in the car, they could fall asleep while you're taking them on a ride through the park in the stroller. You could be wearing them; they could fall asleep that way. Those are all safe places as well. That being said, if they do fall asleep in the car, ideally you want to get them out of the car seat once you do arrive in that location where your end location. But it's okay for them to sleep in the stroller while you're going for a walk. It's okay for you to wear them, but again, as you're wearing them, make sure that their airway is open so that they're protected and they can breathe adequately.
That's great. I love that. And the other thing we want to think about too is, perhaps having them in a dark room as much as possible, for nights and for naps. Perhaps adding a sound machine. And we Nanit makes a really lovely sound machine, and we also have sounds that come through the camera as well if you wanted to use your white noise or a variety of different sounds that way. Um, can you tell us, Lauren, a little bit about what a nap schedule could look like for, for a typical, say, for example, 4 to 6 month old, and what folks can do to move towards a schedule if they don't yet have a schedule for their 4 to 6 month old?
Yeah, definitely. So, the first year of life, sleep is just rapidly changing. You get into like one schedule with naps and one schedule with nighttime sleep, and then something changes, and it's really not linear. But ideally, around 4 months, babies are having anywhere from like 3 to 4 naps in a day.
Mhm.
This is happening around 4 to 6 months. 4 months is a really critical period around sleep because what drives sleep is two biological processes. There's sleep pressure, which is the amount of pressure in the brain that makes you feel tired. And so that's driving sleep. And then there's also the circadian rhythm, which is really based on light and darkness cues to help you regulate your sleep. And by 3 months of age, the circadian rhythm is really developed. So by 4 months, we're really expecting sleep to become slightly more predictable. That being said, no baby is the same. But we're anticipating, in the around 4 to 6 months, they're sleeping about napping about 3 to 4 times a day, and naps can range anywhere from 40 minutes to an hour and a half. Sleep cycles for babies under 1 are anywhere from 40 to 60 minutes. So it's very normal for a baby to sleep for 40 minutes and then kind of wake up a little bit. Some can settle back down and go into another sleep cycle. Some might need assistance to go into another cycle, but it's okay to have those shorter naps since they're sleeping so much throughout the day.
Great. I love that. And it's actually a really nice reminder to just remind folks that there is a lot of variability in what is normal around naps. There you may have a neighbor whose baby always takes 2 or 3, 1 hour or 2 hour naps, and your baby is only taking 30-minute naps. And I think we kind of want folks to understand that it's really normal, to have that variability in naps. And what is normal for one baby may not be the same for another. And also too, what happens one day may not happen the next day as well. So particularly in those early months, really is so much variation. Um, and also too, I think it's important for folks to kind of understand that we don't really have these sort of hard and fast rules around the, absolute number of hours that a baby quote unquote should be napping, throughout the day. Again, there's a lot of variability in what is normal for daytime naps and for overnight. Given that, Lauren, what would you recommend folks do to try and get their minds, or try and establish sort of a nice, a routine during the day to ensure that their babies are getting enough sleep during the day, and enough to eat during the day, but they're not, overtired at the end of the day, or that they've not had too many naps or too much nap time during the day.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I think what's really helpful in this age range is to really pay attention to baby's tired cues. So there's some early cues that are things such as like having red eyebrows, they're averting eye contact, they turn their head when you're talking to them, they might just like stare blankly. That's a really good time. And that can happen, about after like 1 to 2 hours of being awake. And so once they start showing those signs, it may be helpful then to try and get them to nap. And catching them when they're showing those early cues, you have a higher likelihood that they'll be able to to settle down to sleep really nicely. Once we wait until like the later tired cues, that's when they're like crying intensely. They're just completely melting down because they're so tired. It's really hard to get them to settle down at that point. So I think it's really helpful to pay attention to those tired cues to help to let their biology and their rhythm kind of guide your rhythm for the day. And then, let them sleep as long as they need to sleep to get that sleep pressure down. If after that 40, 60 minute window, they wake up, and they kind of are a little like restless, not able to settle back down, maybe go in, pat on the back, shush them, whatever might help them kind of settle back down. If they go into another sleep cycle, great. If they don't, okay, that's okay. Then you say, all right, we're going to end this nap now. And then, start looking for those tired cues again in like 1 to 2 hours, and get them out in the daylight. That really helps too. If possible, if weather allows, get them out, get them doing, active things. Just the daylight is so helpful in that circadian rhythm, supporting the circadian rhythm and helping to, again, starting to build that sleep pressure again.
Yes, I love that. Okay, great. Um, and we have a question in the chat that I'm going to get to now, actually, Lauren, just because we're talking about, specifically sort of 4 to 6 month olds. We have someone with a 4.5 month old who was she used to self-soothe, but now mom is having a hard time, getting her back to sleep. And she said she's afraid that if I do help her every time, this could create a bad association for the future. Do you have any tips around that sort of 4 to 5 month range where, we often we sometimes see this sort of what feels like sort of a backslide when babies were sleeping well, and then their sleep is disrupted and they're sleeping less well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. This can be a really hard time for sleep. I know, some people call it like a sleep regression. I prefer the term like sleep progression because what's happening developmentally is this is a huge developmental period for other milestones. And so when they are meeting these other developmental milestones, their motor milestones, they're starting to learn to like, they're sitting up, they might be starting to crawl and just explore their environment more. So, there's a ton of brain growth happening during this time, and that can affect their ability to sleep how they were in the months past. And as Natalie and I have both said, like sleep is not linear. It is like a roller coaster, and so that's very normal for them to kind of have these backslides. In terms of developing reliance on those self-settling cues, every baby's different. I wouldn't let that scare you because it might just be during this period that she or he is going through. They might just need this extra support to connect those sleep cycles. It is really impossible for a baby once they get so worked up and they're screaming and they're crying. It is impossible developmentally for them to calm down without a caregiver helping them do that. It's called co-regulation. It's the concept that the baby's nervous system's reliant on the caregiver's nervous system to kind of self-regulate, and you need to be self-regulated in order to feel calm enough to relax and go to sleep. So we ideally want to try to intervene before the baby gets to the point where they're so upset and melting down, because it's going to be really hard to get them back relaxed to that sleep space. So I think it's okay to do those gentle, pats or shushing or whatever you might need to do to just help them connect to those cycles. And again, if they're not able to do it, okay, if they can't do it today, you try again tomorrow, you try again the next nap. This is not going to be forever. By about a year, they're very good at consolidating this sleep and connecting those sleep cycles. So I think it's just really helpful in this period of just kind of unreliability or unpredictability to just know that it's not going to be forever. I promise you, your baby will sleep again, and you will sleep again. And so, just keep that in mind. It's just a mantra that I kept going back to, that this is not forever. They will sleep. This is not forever.
It
So
feels like forever at the time. Absolutely does. And one other thing that I just wanted to mention, Lauren, too, is that sometimes when we're seeing issues with naps, sometimes it can also translate to issues at nighttime as well. And so one of the really important things that we want to stress is that when your baby is capable of self-soothing or self-settling, it's really nice to be able to give them the opportunity to do that. So, and the one of the easiest ways to start doing that is at the beginning of the night. So if you can give your baby the opportunity to fall asleep by themselves in that crib at the beginning of the night, somewhere around that, 4 month age, it's going to be much easier for them, A, to fall back to sleep when they wake up during the night, and B, start to get to sleep for naps as well. So if your baby has, if there has been somewhat of a backslide and you're having, trouble with them going down for naps, just make sure that if we can, try and encourage them to be falling asleep by themselves at the beginning of the night, and that often leads to sort of a little bit of an improvement in naps as well. That said, the other thing that you can think about is you can think at that sort of 4 to 5 month age, is you can think about a somewhat of a schedule for your babies. Much before 4 months, it can be really hard to expect your babies to be following a fairly consistent schedule. But around that 4 month mark, if your baby isn't on a regular schedule during the day, it's a really nice time to try starting to get them on a more regular schedule during the day. And that more regular schedule might also help with the timing and getting them, making it a little bit easier for them to get themselves, to sleep and back to sleep and consolidating those naps. Um, so there's lots of questions in here, and I'm going to get to them. Um, oh, this is a really nice one from Rebecca. My 5.5-month-old only sleeps on me, either on my chest after a bottle or on her side on a nursing pillow. How do I get her to nap in the crib, or is it not a bad thing? So, Lauren, this is a great one for you.
Yeah. So, I think first of all, it's totally normal for your baby to want to sleep that way. I mean, biologically, babies want to be close to their caregiver, and in physical contact. And I think there's not necessarily anything wrong with it as long as you are okay with it. If you want to make a change, there are things you can do to help that, such as if they're, I don't know if they sleep in the crib at night or not, but I think it can be really helpful um, to use daytime to have them go in the crib and kind of, play around. You can put them in the crib while you're folding laundry, just kind of make it so that they feel more comfortable and they're, aware of the environment. And so it's not completely startling when they end up there once they're asleep. And then I also think, you can try to, when you're paying attention to those early tired cues before they get too tired, try putting them down to sleep. Once they are still slightly awake, to see if they will fall asleep that way before the nap, before they fall asleep with you. But, I don't want to discourage you from holding the baby if that's what is bringing you joy and is it, bringing you comfort. But I think there definitely are things that you can do to try and work towards, moving away from that if that is something that you're wanting to do.
That's great. Thanks, Mel. I appreciate it. Sorry. Thanks, Lauren. I appreciate it very much. Um, and this is a really nice question as well. Should I be waking up my 4.5-month-old if she's napping for long periods? Sometimes she'll go for 2 to 3 hours. I would love your thoughts on your take on that one.
Um, you know, I I mean, my philosophy, I'm also a pediatric nurse, and so my hard and true philosophy is never wake a sleeping baby. Um, I really think if your baby is sleeping that length of time, most likely they need that sleep. The sleep pressure built up to the point where they need to sleep that length of time. That being said, if you are doing things to lengthen those naps, I would maybe consider seeing if you could, I don't know if they're just doing that on their own. And if they are, I think that's okay. If you're doing things to lengthen it, I would maybe try to move away from that to just see what they end up doing on their own. Because it's a babies wake up it's a protective mechanism against SIDS, and they sleep lightly to remind themselves to breathe. And so we don't want to be doing things that could make them, could kind of hinder that protective response. And I'm not saying that you're doing that by any means. But I think, if they're sleeping that length of time on their own, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but they just might not need as many naps that during the day. Your baby might just need 2 naps during the day if they take 2 long naps. Again, all babies are different. And there's really no like hard and cut rules on when and how much they need to be sleeping at certain points during the day. So I would suggest, leaning into what your baby's doing on their own and knowing that that's okay.
I think that's great. And on a related note, what is the reason that my baby wakes up crying after every nap?
Um, So, I mean, I think that can be normal. It's not necessarily indicative that there's a problem. They could kind of be startled when they wake up from their sleep cycle. They, might be, I don't know how they're falling asleep, if they're falling asleep in your arms, for example, and then they're waking up and you're not there. That could be startling to them, depending on their age. Around 6 to 9 months is prime for separation anxiety. So when they wake up and they see that you're not there, again, that could kind of cause them to wake up. Some babies just struggle with waking up. They don't want to wake up, and it's it's not abnormal for babies to be upset when they're waking up from their naps. So, you're not doing anything wrong. There's not anything wrong with your baby. I think that that is a normal phenomenon in the first year, and it won't happen forever by any means. But it is within the range of normal for that to happen.
And it's different for each baby. I Of my three babies, one always woke up crying from every single nap, and the other two did not. And he did that until he was 2.5, I think. So and I just learned to realize that, and then he calmed down very quickly, but it was different from my other kids, and so it was something that I definitely worried about for sure. So it's very reassuring to hear that it's not something that we need to worry about. So, but thinking about just going back to our sort of our thinking about our normal sleep patterns, tell us a little bit about what happens around the 7 to 9 month mark and what is sort of most typical for that age range.
Yeah, so normally around 7 to 9 months, babies will transition to about 2 to 3 naps. Again, this is going to be dependent on your baby, how long those naps are. If they take a really long morning nap, for example, they might take a shorter afternoon nap. They might only have 2 naps one day, 3 naps another day. One night nap might only be 20 minutes. I mean, it really is going to depend on your baby and what you have going on, you know, that day, and their sleep pressure and their cues, all of that. But typically we see them in the 7 to 9 month age going from 2 to 3 naps. Also, as I said in the prior response, this is also a prime time in development when babies are developing or understanding the concept of object permanence, and so they are aware when you or another caregiver is not there. So you might be facing some struggles with, you leaving the room, trying to put the baby to sleep, or when they wake up, they're upset because you're not there, and that's totally normal. And again, will not be forever, but it can be it can be a struggle for babies around that age.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to note around that age, yeah, I mean, there is so much going on, but babies have typically started solids at a and well established on solids during this time, and so their feeding changes throughout the day. They go from only having milk to then transitioning to having sort of milk and solid feedings, and it can be a really nice time to think about having a fairly consistent feeding and sleeping schedule throughout the day. And it's also the age where most babies are transitioning from 3 naps down to 2. And I think it can feel a little overwhelming for parents to feel like they have to be home for all of these naps and all of these feedings, and there are a lot of feedings and a lot of naps at this age, and it really can feel overwhelming. So one of the things I like to recommend practically is, if you can, to try and have those first 2 naps at home and then the third nap out and about. And I like to recommend that for a couple of reasons. One, um, that it's usually that first nap that is the easiest to get the baby down for. If you are struggling with getting them to nap, that's usually the easier one. And then and two, as they go from, transitioning from 3 down to 2, that third nap really becomes sort of a cat nap to get them through until bedtime. And I don't really care if it's a 10-minute nap or a 45-minute nap. So I don't want the baby, struggling for a long time to get themselves to sleep for a 15-minute nap. And it's a really nice opportunity to get yourself out and about, go for a walk, get some fresh air. And if the baby falls asleep, in the stroller or in the carrier on the go, they get the opportunity to have that cat nap. And you've had the opportunity to be out and about. You can meet friends for coffee. You can take your older child to the playground. You can get your groceries, purchased, do whatever you need to do, but all the while still being able to give your baby the opportunity to nap at around the time that they need to nap. So the thing that will then happen is the baby will naturally just drop that nap at some point. So as opposed to the baby, struggling at home to take that 10-minute nap and then not taking the nap, you're out and about, the baby doesn't fall asleep for that third nap, and so you would then, perhaps put the baby down to bed earlier in the evening for bedtime. And so it becomes this sort of really nice natural way to drop that third nap, I find. And also means that you have the opportunity to get out and about if you're able to, or if your caregiver is able to do that. It's so that everyone gets some fresh air, everyone gets some sunlight, everything feels better when you're out and about and not necessarily tied to the house. Lots of us love being at home, and that is wonderful, wonderful too. But it's nice to have the opportunity to get out and about, but also too knowing that you can still maintain your baby's schedule, and also sort of give them that opportunity to, have the nap if they need it, but then drop that nap as they start to drop that nap. So the next age I would love to think about, Lauren, is this sort of 10 to 11 month old age range. Do you have any recommendations around that age range, or tell us what is sort of normal around that age range?
Yeah, so typically by this point, they have dropped that third, cat nap. And so they typically are in like a solid two nap period. That being said, anywhere from like 11 to 15 months, they might transition down to one nap. And so this is a period where you do want to kind of be paying attention to how, I agree with you that that first nap is usually easier to get them down. That being said, if they start to fight that or even the second nap, then you might consider trying one, solid nap where it's usually can be anywhere from like 1.5 to 2.5 hours. And usually, as I said, that happens kind of around the 1 year mark, but there's a quite a range of when that could happen. So, you could see this happening before 1 year of age. If they're really starting to fight those two naps, it might be the time to cut down to one. And when those two naps happen in the course of the day, it's usually, like pretty early in the morning. Like if the baby's waking up anywhere between like 6, 7, 8 o'clock. It's usually happening about 2.5 hours after that wake up time. Again, paying attention to their tired cues, seeing if they're ready for it. And then that second nap will happen anywhere from like 2 to 3 hours after that first nap. But you want to make sure that they are waking, that they're not sleeping too late with that second nap. I know I said never wake a sleeping baby, but we want to try to not necessarily really lengthen that second nap because we want to make sure there's enough sleep pressure built up prior to bedtime.
Yeah, and so it's a really great point. And so the things that we're watching out for when we're looking for that transition from two down to one, um, look, there's as Lauren said, there's a lot of range in when babies will transition from two down to one, and what we may have in between is somewhere where we're certainly not ready for one, but our regular sort of timing for the two naps is not quite there because they need to have built up enough sleep pressure to be tired enough to go down. So we may want to extend that sort of earlier wake window in the morning a little bit, and then perhaps extend the wake window in between, all the while making sure that we still have enough time in the afternoon for them to build up that sleep pressure to be ready to go down, at night. And I know that it can be very confusing, and this time in particular, it may be a time where you may need to wake a baby from a nap to ensure that we're able to build up that sleep pressure for the next time that they need to go down. And I know that for babies in daycare that can certainly be tricky. If you're depending on your daycare, they may just let the baby nap for as long as they want, and they're taking a 3-hour nap at 9:30, and you didn't want them to take a 3-hour nap at 9:30, or they're taking two naps, or they're taking down to taking one nap at daycare, but they're still taking two at home. So I know that can be a tricky transition. The one thing that I would say about that transition is, or that time period is, if we're thinking about transitioning those 11, 12-month olds, 13-month olds down to one nap, the one thing I'd like to recommend is trying to give them their lunch before they go down for that nap. And that it could be that instead of giving them lunch at, 12:30 or 1 o'clock, you're ending up giving them lunch at 11 or 11:30. But know that giving them that lunch can sometimes help lengthen that nap. So if we are, wanting to transition them to one nap, it can be really nice to have this sort of very long restorative nap in the middle of the day. And if we're feeding them ahead of that nap, that can help, lengthen that nap if we can. So that would be the one thing that I would sort of recommend if we're, thinking about that transition, that, if we do want to have, one nap, that giving them lunch beforehand can really help.
Definitely.
So, now, Lauren, let me think about. I wanted to talk a little bit about sleep disruptors. So can you tell us a little bit about developmental milestones and how they can impact sleep?
Yeah, sure, of course. So, I somewhat touched on earlier how in that first year of life, a lot of motor milestones are happening. So, learning to crawl, learning to roll both directions, and a really key thing about the rolling aspect is you want to get them, especially by 4 months, you want them out of the swaddle. As
Mhm.
soon as they start rolling, they need full access to their arms so that they
Can you
can
tell us more about
safely,
that?
yeah,
Yeah.
they need full access to their arms so they can safely, roll back onto their back. So as soon as you see them roll from their back to their side, their front to their back, they need to be out of that swaddle. You could always try one hand first. That sometimes works well for babies. Or you can just, try both arms. By that time, the starter reflex is diminishing. So, but again, like if you're putting them to sleep before, or you're putting them in the crib before they're fully asleep, you don't have to worry about trying to put them down and then they startle awake. But it's the safest thing, because otherwise, if they don't have access to their arms and they're completely swaddled down when they turn over, their airways in jeopardy. And so it's really not safe. But with all these other milestones, we are, you know, just there's so much brain growth happening in this first year of life, and so it's very common for these different milestones, for teething, for growth, physical growth happening. All of these can disrupt sleep, and it's not. I know it might feel problematic or seem problematic, but it's not. It's completely normal. It's very normal for at all of these stages. Once they start walking, or trying to walk, pulling up. Another thing you want to consider too is, with the crib safety, is once they're able to kind of pull themselves up, you want to make sure that the crib is down in the lowest position so that they're not at risk for climbing out of it. You want to make sure that, sometimes sleep sacks can help with that. And sleep sacks are different than a swaddle. A sleep sack is kind of like a wearable blanket, where their arms are free, but they are kind of covered from their torso down to their legs, and kind of like a sleeping bag equivalent. And those are really helpful in keeping a baby warm in the winter, for example. And they have them of different weights, in terms of how warm they are, the amount of warmth they provide. But you want to be just thinking about, um, safety, in addition to how the sleep is affected with all of these new developments of milestones.
Yep, I really love that. And one thing I just wanted to mention about the rolling, I know rolling can really freak a lot of parents out, and they get, scared when they see their babies rolling onto their tummies. One thing that I just wanted to say is that we will always, always put our babies to sleep on their backs, but when they're capable of getting themselves onto their tummies, it's fine for them to stay there. So know that, but that said, we want to make sure that they're out of that swaddle so that they can be in that safe position. And to that point, the other thing that we don't recommend is any sort of a suit, magic Merlin suit that would then be, sort of holding them in one position as well, because similarly, it can it's possible for them to get themselves onto their tummies and not be able to be in a safe position or not be able to move the way we want them to move. And also too, I want you to think about the crib as being kind of like a gym for your babies. They're practicing at night and at naps, all of the things that they're doing and learning during the day. And we want their movements to be as unrestricted as possible. And so when they're in that kind of, restrictive suit, it can, it can be very restrictive for them. And we want to make sure that they're able to move around and grow and, do whatever they need to do in that crib space.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely. And babies prefer to sleep on their stomachs a lot of the time. So, it's safe and okay for them to do it if they are physically able to put themselves back on their back, which you will know because you'll see them do it during the day when they're on the floor doing tummy time and all of that. So, don't freak out if you wake up and you look at the monitor and they're on their belly. They're able to move themselves out of that position as well, as long as they have their arms available to do so.
Yep, exactly. And so, but that's a really great point, Lauren. One of the things that we would also recommend that parents do would be to practice that tummy time as much as they can during the day so that their baby is comfortable in that position. They know what to do with their head and their arms in that position. And I know a lot of babies don't like tummy time, but literally it's just a matter of practicing. So, and we want your baby to be in tummy time for as long as they are happy. If that is 30 seconds and they then start um, we start seeing in their new position if they happen to get themselves onto their tummies in the middle of the night, because what we don't want is we don't want you to, or during that, so we don't want you to be having to go in there and roll them back 50 times because they start to fuss when they get onto their tummies, because they're very smart and they will work out very, very quickly that if I get myself onto my tummy, someone is going to come in and roll me back. So we want them to be comfortable in that position, and practicing tummy time during the day is really a great way for us to, have them learn how to be comfortable and learn what to do with their little bodies when they do get into that position. Um, so you also touched on separation anxiety earlier. I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about separation anxiety.
Yeah, sure, of course. So it's a very developmentally normal thing that happens in kids, usually around 6 to 9 months, and then it can last all the way through 18 months. I mean, it kind of can wax and wane. It's not going to be intense that whole period, but it's developmentally normal for a child to be upset when their parent is no longer, in their eyesight. And it's a sign of good attachment. It means that your baby, loves you and misses you and wants you when you are not there. And that is a normal, healthy thing for your baby to want and need. Um, that being said, it can make goodbye at nighttime really difficult. And so I think it's really helpful in that hour before bed, especially if you're away from your baby during the day, if they're in daycare or another childcare situation. Um, Spending some quality, one-on-one uninterrupted time, put the phone down. I know that's so hard to do, but put the phone away and just really spend some time connecting and loving and cuddling, whatever, you and your baby want to do. And I think pre-bedtime, that hour before bed, is a really great time to do that. You can really fill your cup, you can fill up your baby's cup, and I think it's having that one-on-one time with you and feeling the love from you will really help them kind of feel fulfilled and feel calm and secure, which will help them fall asleep.
I love that. I love it. Um, the other sleep disruptor that I wanted to talk a little bit about, there's two things that I wanted to just mention would be travel and getting sick. So, can you tell us a little bit about your guidelines around travel and also your guidelines around getting sick?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, both of these things are going to happen, particularly the getting sick thing. But travel, if that's something that you did pre-baby, I think it's definitely something that you should pursue if if you're able to, post-baby as well. And I don't want sleep to make you afraid to do that. And so I think with travel, what's really helpful is, if possible, try and follow a similar schedule to what you were keeping at home. So for example, if you have to take an airplane or drive somewhere, try and time that with when the baby would normally nap. Because, they, especially if they enjoy the car, then that could be an opportunity for them to get that good nap in, that first nap in. And then you're setting yourself up to have, a period to then get settled and wherever you're going, after the fact. But no, but at the same time, be aware that, with travel, you have to have flexibility and grace, and they will get back to what they were doing pre-travel eventually. And so just, keep reminding yourself of that. And it is normal for some babies to, not like sleeping in other places, and they might put up a little bit of fuss. They might need a little extra support with sleep, and that's okay. It will return back to how it was pre-travel, once you're back into your normal routine. Terms of sickness, it's really difficult because, as I said, I'm a pediatric nurse, so this is something that I'm very familiar with. Typically, babies will require more sleep when they're sick. And so you might see that they're getting tired earlier. They might be sleeping for longer periods, but they also might have more disrupted sleep. Babies are nose breathers. When they get a respiratory issue, a respiratory virus, and their nose is really stuffy, it's really hard for them to breathe, and they're not used to breathing out of their mouth. And so they're waking up and their mouth is all dry. And so they might have more disrupted sleep. They might need more sleep, but they might be waking up more. So, again, I think it's really important to respond to those wake ups, because I know it's exhausting for us as parents to do so, but if they're sick, especially, you want to make sure that their breathing's okay. You want to make sure that there's not, that if they have a fever, and they're upset about the fever, we want to treat that fever so that they can go back to sleep and feel comfy. So we want to make sure that we are responding to those wake ups at night, when they are sick, and just know, again, it's not going to last forever. They will get better. And in that period, they probably will need more sleep, but it might be more disrupted.
Yeah. And also too, I think it's just a good reminder that, we know that these are very common sleep disruptors. But also too, I think it's important to remember that you can get right back on track as soon as your baby is well, or if you're traveling, as soon as you're back home. So these are really very, very common sleep disruptors, but it may mean that you need to do a little bit of, if you have a sleep trained your baby, you may have to sort of re-sleep train for a couple of days to get your babies back on track, or get back to your usual habits or your usual routine, for them to get back on track. One There's a couple of other questions that I would really love to get to before we finish up. We have sort of blown through this, and it's gone very quickly. This is a really great question from Rebecca. Would you put your baby to sleep for a nap? When you put your baby to sleep for a nap in their room, do you put the sleep sack on them?
I mean, yes, you can. If they are used to having the sleep sack at night, they probably will be looking for that for a nap as well. It's kind of becomes a sleep association. So, if they are sleeping in their crib and you're setting up the environment similar to how it is at nighttime, then yes, I suggest putting the sleep sack on them. The only times you would want to avoid a sleep sack is if there was an environmental issue, like if it was too hot. If it's too hot in the room, you want to avoid a sleep sack, because we do not want babies to overheat, because it's not safe for them to overheat. So that's really the only time I would suggest avoiding a sleep sack, day or night. But otherwise, yes, definitely use a sleep sack during a nap if you're using it at night.
Great, love it. And we have one more question. My 4-month-old started to regress a week before 3 months. He only sleeps 30 to 40-minute increments at night. We're trying not to feed every wake up, but he screams to the point of getting himself sick. Any ideas of how to help him? I think this is a great question.
Ugh, that's so hard. I'm so sorry that that's happening. it definitely seems like, you know, he's going through a progression, which again is normal at this age. Um, I I would definitely, and it sounds like you're doing it, that you are trying to intervene, you know, when he's waking up. But I would try before he gets to the point of getting so worked up that he's getting sick. Try to intervene when he just, you know, give him a couple minutes, a minute or two, to see if he will resettle himself. If he doesn't, I would try and, you know, shush him, pat him, just to avoid him getting to the point where he gets so worked up. Because once he gets so worked up, it's going to take that much longer for him to calm down and go back to sleep. So I hear what you're saying in terms of the not feeding to sleep every time. And it's so hard to know, you know, why a baby is waking up that amount of time. I would definitely make sure that the diaper's not wet, you know, and maybe try feeding the first time just to get that as an issue out of the way, knowing that, okay, I just fed him 30 minutes ago, and most likely he's not hungry again. You know, that's probably not the issue, but trying to troubleshoot to make sure there's nothing biological that's happening that's making him wake up, but also trying to see if you can intervene before he gets to the point of being so worked up that he's getting sick. You know, we want to try and avoid that if we can. It's not always possible, but it's that's just really hard. And I'm sorry, and I promise you, it's not going to last forever. I promise.
And one thing that I would add though, Lauren, like at this age, you know, we know that babies are typically capable of self-soothing if they're given the opportunity. And we would typically recommend that if you're wanting to try and give them the opportunity to self-soothe, that we try it at the beginning of the night. You know, when they're tired, they're full, their diaper is dry, you know that they are, you know, ready for bed. It's a really great time to give them the opportunity to fall asleep by themselves. And once they can do it at the beginning of the night, it makes it that much easier for them to do it when they wake up during the night. And you will likely see that those wake ups start to drop away once they're capable of getting themselves to sleep at the beginning of the night. But I know that it's really hard, and I know it's much easier said than done. But it would be the one thing that I would also just wanted to add on to that. Lauren, we need to think about wrapping up. And I just wondered if there were any sort of last thoughts or, you know, comments that you wanted to make before we wrapped up.
Yeah, I mean, I think just really want to reiterate that this is the first year is really hard with sleep. And you're not doing anything wrong. Your baby's not doing anything wrong. You know, it's not linear. It is much more of a roller coaster. But the first year also, I'm sure you've heard this from so many people, but it goes by so fast. And you will sleep again. Your baby will begin to consolidate their sleep well, and sleep longer stretches. It will happen. I promise you, it will happen. But just know that, you know, you're doing the best you can. Your baby's doing the best they can, and you know, sleep is not the same for everyone. And try to not compare your baby to other babies, because that just doesn't lead to you feeling good about the situation. Every baby's different, and there's a wide range of normal. So, you know, I think just paying attention to when your baby's tired, leaning into those cues can really set you up, and, you know, leaning into their biology can really set you up for success when it comes to sleep in that first year.
I love that. Thanks, Lauren. And I just wanted to mention that our winner of the Sound and Light machine is going to be Sally Stickles. So, Sally, congratulations. And if you can send an email to marketing@nanit.com, and I think that that is in the chat, that email address, and we will get that sound and light machine out to you very soon. Lauren, I can't thank you enough for all of your, you know, very, you know, kind and wonderfully wise words. And we know, you know, to your point, we know that this first year is really difficult, and naps can be, you know, especially difficult for a lot of parents, and especially frustrating for a lot of parents, particularly if their nights are looking pretty good. Those naps can really become very frustrating. And there's a lot of change and a lot that happens over that first year, as babies start to consolidate their sleep. And, we know that it's, to Lauren's point, it's not linear, and it, changes a lot over the year, and you think you have it down, and then all of a sudden something changes. So we hear you and we see you, and we know that that this is not that this is not an easy time. But please feel free to reach out if you have any other questions or comments, and we will look forward to seeing you again soon. And Lauren, thanks so much.
Thank you so much. This was such a delight.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.